Hello, I'm Black Online. If that's your first time here, I talk about some real-life stories and discuss some interesting topics. So if you like these kinds of videos, please subscribe and activate the notifications bell. Let's start. We hear a lot of stories about haunted houses. Hospitals, too, are settings for many horrifying and terrifying stories because of the tragic events occurring there and the resulting conflicting emotions. Without a doubt, employees are the most exposed to such harrowing stories. After a patient dies, doctors and nurses continue to supervise their wards for a long time, and they have to spend more time in those terrifying corridors and abandoned operating rooms. Today, we're going to tell you about some of the most terrifying incidents that have occurred in hospitals and remain unexplained to this day. In Western Canada, there was a cop named Ron where Ron was working a regular day at a large city hospital. He says that he had no previous knowledge of the hospital's past, but it is located in a remote area and appears frightening at night. It was Ron's night shift in the emergency department that day. He said that they witnessed everything in that department, including suicides, victims of homicides, accidents, and so on. All of them are tragic events. But what was Ron's job? Because Ron is a cop, his job was to ensure the safety of all patients, and everything must be under control. He also assisted doctors and nurses in moving some bodies to the morgue. The morgue was on the underground floor and was very old and scary. Ron was in charge of transferring a body that day when something unexpected happened that caught him off guard. Ron grabbed the body and started walking down the corridors. The corridor was quiet and empty when he suddenly noticed movement inside the body bag. He stopped and focused his attention on the bag and wondered if it was a hallucination or if the bag had actually moved. Then he said to himself, "But the patient is dead, and I was with the nurses when he died. Could he still be alive?" He says that he had heard of post-mortem spasms, but he's not a doctor, so he doesn't know if that's what caused the body to move or not. However, there was no scientific explanation for what happened next. After Ron noticed the body moving, he decided to open the bag to confirm whether the man is dead or alive. He carefully opened the bag and focused his attention on the body when the body suddenly moved a second time. But this time, the body opened its eye, and Ron heard the man say, "Help me." The voice was low and muffled. Ron screamed and called the doctors. He told them that the patient wasn't dead, but rather alive, and that the doctor examined the pulse with his stethoscope. But the terrifying thing was that the man is already dead. He's completely dead, and there's no sign that he's still alive. So the doctor told Ron that he's probably hallucinating, and he should get some rest. But Ron assured that the voice he heard came from the body, and that it really moved, so the doctor took over the body. And Ron left the shift, even though it hadn't ended yet, but he might have really needed some rest. So, once Ron got in his car, he started to think about it, and he wondered, why did that guy ask for his help? And barely a minute had passed when his train of thought was interrupted by a phone call. The phone call came from the emergency department, informing him that there was an emergency in the hospital and asking him to come quickly. The sirens were activated. Ron noticed Ron began inspecting the hospital after entering it. The lights at the reception were turned off. Ron started to hear muffled sounds coming from inside the building. He felt like someone was watching him the entire time. But the odd thing was that no one was inside the building, or to be more specific, in the place where he was. Ron approached the source of the sound. He was shocked to see the doors open and close on their own. He went straight to the inner hall and checked to make sure no one was there, but he had a strong feeling he was being watched. You probably know that sensation of being watched. However, Ron returned to the reception hall and he was surprised to see that the lights were on when they had been off just a few moments ago. It started to get scary. The doors were slamming shut and opening up again. That was unusual, and the lights turned on and off on their own. Ron speculated that the body he had moved earlier might have something to do with it all. He had a strong feeling that he was not welcome there, and he needed to leave as soon as possible. Ron left the building and spent the entire night thinking about what had happened. He later discovered that he wasn't the only one who had gone through such terrifying experiences, and that many members of the hospital's employees had similar experiences, all of which were unexplainable. However, no one has ever unraveled the mystery surrounding that location that caused all of those strange occurrences, from west of Canada to south of Florida. One day, the police summoned the investigator Marlene Pellicer to investigate the death of a child who drowned in a swimming pool. The time was 2 a.m. After the child's breathing stopped completely, the police declared him dead. Marlene's mission was to find out what caused the child's death and determine whether his death was the result of a mistake or foul play, and investigate everything about that incident because, if God is willing, her investigation may save other children so their lives don't end the same way as that child's. However, Marlene went to the hospital to pick up the child's case file. According to Marlene, working on cases involving children is extremely difficult, whether those children were witnesses or victims, and that's what drives her to do everything she can to discover the truth. When Marlene arrived at the nurse's office, Marlene gave her the child's name and instructed her to include all pertinent information about his death, such as the nature of injuries and their causes, as well as all relevant details. Marlene felt as if a small apparition passed beside her at that moment. She turned around, but no one was there. Don't you know the feeling when you catch a glimpse of a passing person out of the corner of your eye? That's exactly what happened to her. But the strange thing is that it had happened more than once. But she had ignored it and concentrated on her mission. After a few minutes, the nurse returned to Marlene and informed her that the report hadn't yet been completed. But if she returns an hour later, it might be done. Marlene got out of the hospital and called the child's family and requested that they open the house for her to conduct her investigation. The family was out of the house at the time. They're not allowed to be there because it's a crime scene and an investigation site. However, while Marlene was driving to the house, she continued to feel as if there was someone around her. She was so concerned that she kept making sure the doors were locked. She even kept checking the back seat. Marlene says she had no idea why she was afraid. That wasn't her first case, nor was it the first child death she investigated. Something unusual about that case set it apart. When Marlene arrived at the house, she went straight to the pool, the location where the child died. She started thinking about the pool's safety. Is there anything that could have led to that incident? Marlene started taking photos of the pool and the backyard, which is an important part of the investigation. She pondered everything and every possibility of the incident. It was a very painful and strange feeling to realize that just a few hours ago, a child had died in that place. Her fear grew, but she tried to ignore it and concentrate on her work, because that's what's required. Marlene went to the other side of the house and continued taking photos when suddenly she heard something falling into the pool. She dashed to the pool and began inspecting the place, but strangely, she didn't find anything. There are no trees around the pool that could be the source of the noise. There are no pets in the house either. What's more frightening is that the cops were surrounding the pool. So how did something fall into the pool? How strange. Her greatest fear was finding someone hiding inside the house because it was very dark and she sensed something unusual going on. She proceeded to the opposite side of the house to continue her investigation, and then she heard something fall into the pool for the second time. But it sounded heavier this time than the first one. She described it as if someone had fallen into the pool. Marlene immediately went to the pool, and she looked around. But nothing could have explained the noise she had heard. Marlene took a step back and realized there was something going on, but she couldn't leave until she had finished her investigation. So she decided to go inside the house and continue her work. The house had 2 stories. No one was around because, as we previously stated, it was a crime scene. Marlene began taking pictures all over the house when she was startled by a noise near her. It sounded more like footsteps, as if a child was running upstairs. Again, Marlene felt like there was someone in the house, so she went upstairs. She was certain that someone from the family was still in the house and did not leave, which is illegal. Marlene looked in every room. She even looked in the closets and under the beds, but no one was there. Marlene was the only one in the house. Marlene was done and unable to continue the investigation, and she was perplexed. She decided to gather her belongings and return to the hospital to pick up the report. At 4:00 a.m., Marlene arrived at the hospital. When she went inside, she saw a small child standing in the hallway. She was surprised by his presence at such a late hour and asked him about his parents. And when she tried to approach him, he ran away. She pursued him, attempting to stop him. "Don't be afraid. I'm trying to help you. Stop," she told him. While running, the child passed through one of the corridors. Marlene followed him, but she was stunned to discover that it was a dead end. Where is the child? He wasn't there. How strange. There was no exit, only a wall. Marlene then went to the nurse and asked her if she had seen the child she was following. The nurse seemed confused and told her there weren't any children there. That's impossible, even though Marlene noticed the nurse looking at the child while she was following him. So how come she didn't see him? Marlene had a very unusual night. Marlene ignored her fears again, and she requested that the nurse give her the drowning incident report. The first thing she saw when she opened the report was a photo of the child, but what shocked her was that he was the same child she was just pursuing, whom she saw in the hospital corridors. Marlene believed he was the source of all those strange events that night. He was the one who was following her around the house, and he was the source of all the noises in the pool. Marlene pursued her investigation into the child's death. However, she did not mention what happened to her in the report because she was concerned about losing her credibility, because it was something supernatural that she saw a dead child or his ghost. Things like this shouldn't be included in a death report because they are supernatural. Many years have passed since that incident, and Marlene eventually retired, but she still remembers the incident and the child's face, but she was unable to find answers to all of her questions. After Florida, let's return back to Canada. Anya Davis, a 14-year-old girl, went to see her grandfather at the hospital. She used to go to see her grandfather every day after school and spend a lot of time with him, she and her mother. Anya was very attached to her grandfather. She was an only child, and her mother was the only daughter of the grandfather. They were a close-knit family. Anya used to bring her books and do her homework at the hospital every day, even though it wasn't the best place for her or anyone else. But she made an effort to spend most of her time with her grandfather. Anya usually returned home at night to rest before going to school in the next morning, but for some reason she decided to spend the night at the hospital with her grandfather and to skip school the following day. She stayed up until midnight. Then she felt hungry. She looked for something to eat, but couldn't find any. She asked her mother if she had any food, but she didn't have anything, and she directed her to the cafeteria, where she might find something to eat. Anya went to the cafeteria, but it was closed, so her mother gave her some coins and told her to go buy something from the vending machine, those fridge-like machines where you put a coin in to get some food. So her mother told her to buy something from there because it was the only option left. Only the first floor had vending machines, so Anya went to the first floor, but because it was late at night, no receptionists were present. The first floor was very calm. Anya heard someone speaking to her just as she arrived at the vending machine. His voice was hushed, as if he was whispering. Anya turned around, but saw no one. There was no one there. However, she persisted in getting some food because she was starving, but the voice continued to speak, which was terrifying. Then Anya got goosebumps. Did you ever experience the feeling that someone is following you? That is exactly how she felt. Then she heard someone say to her, "Leave now." So Anya rushed back to the upper floor, and she felt as if something was dragging her to the voice's source. She eventually made it to her grandfather's room, where she stood motionless when she saw a long shadow leaving the room slowly. Anya entered the room and was shocked to find out that her grandfather had died. She had the feeling that the shadow belonged to her grandfather. Anya's mother also reported seeing the same shadow leave the room. Investigators of supernatural phenomena explained that all of those occurrences were caused by the souls of the dead, and those souls were roaming the hospital for some reason. However, we Muslims believe that souls return to heaven and don't remain on earth because they belong to the Almighty God, and we don't believe in souls manifesting as ghosts. However, because these are true stories told by witnesses who experienced them. What do you think is the logical explanation for what happened to them? Do you believe it was because of Jinn? Or perhaps they were just delusions? In the end, there still are many mysteries in this vast world, and many supernatural phenomena that we are unable to explain. I'd appreciate it if you could share your thoughts on this video or these 3 stories with me. Have you ever had anything similar happen to you? I hope you enjoyed today's video, which has now come to an end. If you enjoyed it, please like and share it wherever you can if you wish to support me. And thank you very much. The best is yet to come.